Beer Money America. I did realize this is our ninth recording. We still I've got one surprise recording that we haven't really revealed yet. So, because just timing and all the crazy stuff going on, but we've actually made it to 9 recordings already, which is great.
Yeah.
So how are you doing today, John?
Doing good. As we were talking a little bit earlier, but it's about the rain going away and having the sunshine out. So it's feeling like a pretty nice day here finally.
Oh man. I know we need it and all that, but we're just not set up for this. Very well.
Yeah. That's really the thing. It's like there's so little rain through so much of the year and over the time with all the droughts and everything. I think it's even gotten worse. Is that when it does rain in Southern California, everybody's like, oh my God, what are we going to do?
We're such wimps. It's just sad. It's really sad. Anyways, so what's going on in your world? You got some thoughts of a lot of kind of crazy political stuff's been going on. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's funny, but my thoughts actually have less to do with the crazy political things that are going on in the wider world, but more to do with our little local Southern California area here. So a few days ago, actually probably more like about a week ago, I went and I had there was a little group meeting with a group that was called Upward Community, and there's a lady there that runs it, and she got a few people together, and there was some third-party people there, forward-party people. My wife and I went and talked to her. She is great. I'm not going to say names because
Right.
But She was great. And if you're interested, Upward Community, go ahead and look it up. And her whole thing was about what she's calling attainable housing. And I thought it brought up a lot of really interesting things and a lot of things that really I think can be applicable to third parties.
Right.
And so the idea of attainable housing is a little bit different than affordable housing. So affordable housing is more like anybody, anywhere, no matter income. Like if your income is zero, you can get a voucher, and and that creates affordable. Her thing is more like housing for the working poor. Let's put it that way.
Right.
The idea being that, like, if you're working someplace, and I think she was actually an employee of one of these big stores. Again, no names. Right. And her issue is that on her salary, not taking benefits, doing the right things, working hard, doing exactly what you'd expect a person to do, the absolute epitome of like moral, you know. So, but she's in a position where she's never going to make enough money to afford a house because the housing costs in California are absolutely nuts. Yep. Completely out of whack, not only with the rest of the world, but the rest of the country. I mean, it's crazy. And a lot of working people, a lot of, let's call it working poor, are faced with these same things. It's like you work and you work and you work, but you find yourself in this middle ground where you're making too much money to be getting government subsidies, but you're not making enough money to be able to afford the cost of housing. And so it's this financial trap that people get caught in. And so her organization is looking to find ways to create, as I say, what they call attainable housing, so that people who are doing the right thing, who are working hard, actually have an opportunity to, invest, and have their own home, to actually have the American dream that America for so long, boasts about. The idea that if you work hard, you can get ahead. And, the way things are right now, I'm not so sure that that's true. And she's one of the people working to change that. And I think I was very impressed, and she was great. So as I say,
I love that term, attainable housing, and that is a perfect way of putting that, because the whole affordable housing, it is up for literally there are multiple interpretations of what affordable means, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, for those who are working hard, doing all the right things, everything everybody says you're supposed to be doing, still can't get there. Yeah. That's just frustrating, and it's not right. And we need that. We need all those people too, because it's interesting you brought that up, because I went to a kind of a planning workshop for the city of Vista here a week or two ago. And the whole idea is they're trying to gather feedback for future planning purposes for a variety of things. But a lot of it obviously focused around housing. It's like, it's the number. It really is kind of like almost the number one issue right now. To
Mm-hmm.
how do you grow a sustainable economy and a community of people if they don't have a place they can afford to live? I mean,
Yeah, because
it's crazy.
one of the things that came up was is that if you're investing in a house, then you're investing in that community. You have a vested interest in being there and seeing the community do well and succeed. And other things that she talked about is, if you have housing where people are working, you can have retail in that area because people are working.
Sure.
Those are the people that are willing to spend money. But if their entire budget is taken up on housing costs, well, then you can't have retail because they're not going to spend money because all they can do is maybe barely get by to pay the rent. But if you can create the attainable housing, and one of the things that she was suggesting, because it was interesting about you talking about the planning commission, is the idea that cities and states and federal, there's all this land ownership within the government. Now, if
Yep.
the government was willing to donate that to attainable housing projects, then all of a sudden you could have developers using that land that was donated instead of having to go out and buy it, which reduces their cost by a lot, which would facilitate the production of attainable housing. And then once the attainable housing is going in, that attracts retail, which upgrades all kinds of things. Because when you have big developments and retail developments, it's not just the houses that get built, it's the sidewalks, it's the streets, it's new traffic signals, it's sewage, infrastructure, electrical infrastructure. All these
Yep.
things start to go in, and it's a cycle that promotes good communities.
Absolutely.
Whereas where we are currently right now with pricing people out of housing promotes derelict communities, frankly. And so
Oh yeah.
it's her ideas I think are terrific. So I mean, I was
Now
glad to do
she
that.
is she focused on kind of the North County area, all of San Diego? What's the kind of the scope of where she's focusing?
She's mostly in Riverside County, and we met down in Temecula, so it's like border. And
Mhm.
but this sort of brings me to the third party element of it because Linda got to know her through Ford Party somehow. I don't exactly know how she's connected to that, and I don't want to attribute things to her that are not her. But there were some Ford Party interest there, and at times I've been involved in Ford Party. All things aside, I donated money to the Ford Party once, so keeping
Yep.
the books
Same here.
clean, being honest, straightforward.
Yep.
But part of what was interesting to me is as far as the discussion as it went down the road was, how do you get something like attainable housing started? And my thought was that, well, you have to have politicians who are open to the idea of doing something new and different because the politicians that are there now are so entrenched and so bound to the status quo that they simply are not gonna they're not gonna go for these things because it doesn't necessarily help them. In fact, I think that a lot of politicians are unwilling to change things because they're afraid that as soon as they start to upset the apple cart, that puts them in a position where they might lose. So even if they have something that they think is a good idea or could work, they might not be willing to try it because it's like, well, I'm gonna win now if I keep things the way they are. Is it really worth it to me to risk changing things and make something happen? And so they don't do it. And so if you want to change the status quo, if you want to change the regulations and the institutions that are built up around how housing is done currently, you have to get politicians in place to actually be willing to listen to these ideas and potentially make changes. Because right now it's incredibly difficult for her to accomplish any of the things that she wants to accomplish, which is why she's starting this group, because it just isn't happening.
Oh, and that's a real phenomenon. I mean, if you ever want to test it out, um, just go on to Nextdoor, the app Nextdoor,
Mm,
and bring up homeless or something like that. And these, I mean, I don't know where these people come from, but I mean, it's just, and again, I understand the frustration. I think everybody's frustrated by like the homeless situation,
yeah,
but the brutality and the lack of empathy to try and find that solution. I know people read that, politicians in particular read that, and they're fearful of this whole attitude that's going to come back and bite them
yeah,
when they're trying to just make simple suggestions of, hey, what we're doing now isn't working, obviously. So things like trying to figure out an attainable housing
yeah,
option is something we should start looking at because there are so many hardworking people
yeah,
that just simply, and if we need people in the community to do everything, it takes a village.
Right.
Right. We need to figure something out because it's not working. And, and so, no, that is really fascinating. I'll definitely check into that.
But I would just like to emphasize one more time again, because there is such a fixation on homelessness and housing for the homelessness,
right?
That this group of working poor, as I say, the people who are struggling to get by, but aren't necessarily applying for or qualifying for the benefits that the homeless can, the destitute essentially can afford or be given, as I say, by the government. That it's a huge population of people who are working so hard to get by and are completely neglected. And again, if there was a party that rose up, supporting issues like attainable housing, then all of a sudden that would help give, the working poor, the people who are working hard, are doing the things that everybody would hope they would be doing, could actually have representation, and it could actually get reasonable, laws and regulations put in place that could allow them to, move up. Housing investment, it's like, it's a way to save money too. I mean, if you can invest in something, you get equity,
Absolutely.
and then you can hold on to that equity for years.
Yeah, that's the main way to build generational wealth in America, right?
And that's something that comes up a lot. A lot of the time when you hear about people talking about like minority communities or racial differences, who has what and who doesn't, but a lot of that gets wrapped up sometimes in the idea of generational wealth. And you never give people an opportunity to start attaining generational wealth. Well, how do disadvantaged communities ever start to catch up? And the answer is they don't. They stay stuck in the same rent-paying, fee-paying situation and degenerate neighborhood situation they've been in forever. You have to create a society, essentially, that makes attainable housing a reality. That would be so good for so many people. And so, as I say, I was happy to be there and happy to contribute.
No, that is. I'm definitely fascinated in that. I'm going to check that out. And it kind of reminds me of being taking a more holistic approach to, I'm sure you've heard of Habitat for Humanity. I mean, when you look at what Habitat did from the get-go, it was all about giving folks a chance to start building slowly but surely that generational wealth, get them in a home, let them put some sweat equity in it. And it was really focused on the working poor. It's not, I mean, there are a few places where they've built homes that are really trying to just get people off the streets and that sort of thing. But their real focus is really helping those who are, hey, we're looking for a hand up, not a hand out, And so being able to sort of codify that and make that more of a universal approach is kind of what Habitat's really all been about, and in many ways.
Yeah, Habitat for Humanity came up on a couple of occasions, and a lot of people had good thoughts and liked the idea behind Habitat for Humanity. But I think part of the issue with Habitat was it's a national organization that's very spread out, and California has such specific and egregious issues with it that her group is trying to sort of like create a more local, directed group that can deal specifically with this, the issues that are in California. So, yeah, she spoke highly of Habitat, but she wants our local group.
Yeah, and all kudos to them. But in the experiences that I've been involved in, some of the things over the years with them, I mean, it's really hard. And they're having to beg, borrow, and steal, and I mean that in the best of ways, right? To try and get somebody to donate a little bit of land or give it to them at a really decent price, and then try and get people to volunteer to help build these places. I mean, it's a pretty gargantuan effort that goes on for most of those projects, which is, you can only applaud them for doing it, but it's going to be a very slow process to try and solve this issue that's of such a massive scale in California. Now, if you're in Nebraska, it may not be quite as, maybe it's not going to be quite the deal, right? But in California, to your point, I mean, all the crazy stuff developers have to go through. That reminds me, and again, back to local politicians. They're the ones that can make the difference because you could actually do this in wherever, Vista or Temecula or wherever, because you have that local insight and control and make things happen. So,
yeah. Well, as I say, that's what she's talking about too, because the city governments own a lot of land, and frankly, they don't have any real particular reason for owning it.
No.
And if they would release that land, that would be a huge boon to any developer or group that wanted to build something there. And you could, if you wanted, zone that land specifically for attainable housing. And she's got some models that, I'm not really going to comment on because I don't understand them well enough. Right. But the idea generally is that if the state would give up the land and the developer would develop the property, you could keep the prices on the houses low because you would have offset so much of the cost of development by giving the land essentially as a donation. And it's not like this land was being held by some group that's not going to go bankrupt. It's the state,
right?
And the state and the city governments. If they could give this over with a snap of their fingers, and so that would open up a lot of opportunity for people. If you could get that to work out.
Well, it not only offers up those opportunities, but from the city's perspective or the state's perspective, whoever, county, whatever, it just increases the tax base. So
win-win.
They're going to get a lot out of it versus just having a bunch of land sit there vacant. I mean, and it, like to your point, it happened. There's a lot of it, and and I get they're trying to reserve some of it for parks and certain things like that, which is all good. That's all part of it.
And you can designate some of it for that, but there's a vast amount more than what they're using for parks.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so no, that's great. That is an awesome idea, and one that's practical. And we need to add that to when you start your third party. Well, that'll be another policy platform that focusing on attainable housing, not affordable housing, which that is such a distinct difference that I don't think anybody's really, pounced on that, because that's what it really is about.
And it's, as I say, again, you find things like this, and then from an advocate of a third party perspective, I mean, that's why you need a third party. You need a party who's willing to listen to these things and be like, hey, you know what? I will champion that, because that is a really, really good idea.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And it is going to take, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, it is going to take somebody that's not in the clause of a couple of the major parties to make that happen, because I think there's going to be a big appetite for it. And I think a willingness on both sides of the political spectrum to make that happen, because it makes too much sense. Although there are times where things that make too much sense, people still argue against it. But that's one of the best ones that I've heard in a long time. And
she was very inspiring. She was great.
Yeah.
And as I say, Upward Community, I'll say it one more time, Upward Community, if people want to look it up. And
I'm definitely going to check it out. So anyways, well, hey, speaking of local stuff, have you received your ballot in the mail yet?
Yeah. So my wife, I think, got hers, because I think I saw her looking at it. But I'm still registered in Los Angeles, so my stuff is still in LA. So I'm going up to LA to watch the Super Bowl, throw in some Super Bowl stuff. And I'll pick up all the voter registration and things that are up there, and I'll see what's happening.
Yep. So I haven't. We just got ours, and now that I'm no political preference, I haven't even looked at it yet. I probably should have done that before I got online. What that ballot looks like, right?
Yeah, it's funny. As soon as you go no political preference, you get so much less junk mail from the
exactly.
It's amazing. I mean, for a long time, I was recognized as registered as declined to state, and my wife was registered as one of the parties. I won't say.
Right.
And she would get piles and piles and piles of stuff, and I would get nothing. And so I was very happy about that.
Right. Well, there you go. It shows you, I mean, and what it all means. Because, from the moment I went from registered Democrat to no political preference, I mean, it was instantaneous. I mean, it's just like I stopped getting so
Oh yeah.
much stuff. It was like, oh, well, that's a benefit right there. Yeah, that's another thing. Get less crap in your mail.
Yeah.
No political party preference.
But they, having looked at those things though in the past, though, it is kind of an interesting thing to bring up because I mean, it's like the party comes out and sends you a list of the people you're supposed to vote for. It's like we say, think you should vote for all these people, and it's like I would always look at that stuff and I'd be like, my God, there's no information about them. There's nothing. It's just saying we the party say you should vote for these people,
right?
And then I imagine a lot of people do.
Oh, they do. They do. They don't take the time.
Yeah.
And because I know every time an election comes up, I mean, my wife and I end up spending hours because half the time we don't know any of these people, right? Particularly when it comes to things like judges and stuff.
Oh, I know that's so complicated.
And it's just like, okay, start Googling and start trying to, okay, do we have a clue about who we're marking down? And there's been a couple instances where I just don't vote for anybody because it's like I can't in good conscience say this person or that person is worthwhile, because there's nothing on them, or the information is so scant, So, yeah, but I mean, you have to, you understand why they do that because they know a lot of people are going to just blindly check off the marks, and which is kind of scary.
Yeah,
but that's reality.
Yep. I always try and look at the voter guides that come in, and because usually they have a bio or something and it gives you some inkling of what's going on. And so, but I agree with you though. I mean, there have been times in the past where I'm just like, I don't know who these people are at all.
Yeah, exactly. But at least I guess one thing that's a little bit of a step towards progress is, we did confirm, the whole primary thing in California, anyways, it is, the top two. So that's good in one sense that at least there's a little bit more of a level playing field. The downside to it is odds are it's going to be two Democrats, which is the bummer, right?
Yeah.
But at least it gives you the opening for independent, depending on what race we're talking about, an independent to actually make a run at it. Because I mean, again, for some of the representatives, U.S. reps, and definitely state representatives, I mean, the differences in how many votes there are that separate winners between losers is really small.
Very small.
And so the thought of focusing on those local races is where third parties, need to start.
Yeah. You got to start around the margins. There's no question about it.
Absolutely. And I think a lot, success breeds success, right? If we can get a few independents to win some races, it will start. And right now, I mean, you hear it all the time. People are just not at the highest levels, are not satisfied. Take that negativity and turn it into something actionable and positive, and forget about all that craziness going on between Trump and Biden and all that stuff, and focus it on where it really matters. I think there's a real option.
Well, if I can ever weed through the FEC's documentation, which I've started to do, I could figure out, about maybe starting my party and, see if I can't figure out, maybe support some people, maybe have somebody run for something, run for something very small. I don't know. We'll see. Yeah. It was, that was another thing that came up, about spoilers when I was, at that meeting. That's a very long chat, and I think we're coming up on our half hour.
We are.
I mean, we could actually finish on time for once.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe I'll open up the spoilers can of worms, at a different date.
Yeah. Well, we've talked a little bit about that, and I've really gotten over that whole thing much because of our talks. Thank you very much. I'm glad we've had that discussion a little bit in the past. That I think the main message there is just get over the fact that there is such a thing as a spoiler.
Right.
It goes back to the old thing, about, the definition of crazy, right? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results, right?
Right.
And so that now that I've, that's really switched in my brain. That's like, you can't worry about the consequences. You got you've got to make some kind of step. And again, at the local level, it's a great place to start.
Right.
The gargantuan effects that people somewhat fear about when it comes to presidential things and stuff is not going to happen.
Yep.
And there'll be some consequences, I'm sure, but just get over it.
Yeah. I agree. Completely agree.
I mean, I've definitely
start small, get the ball rolling, and then, make the big things happen later on down the road when you can.
Yeah, no, that definitely, and I think it will. If you look at going back to any kind of civil rights movements or anything like that, it's always started at the local level. It's always been a group of at that times radicals, right, that are upset about something, and they start the ball rolling slowly but surely, and it can take decades, right, for something to happen, but it invariably starts with some lady out of Riverside or Temecula, right?
Yeah.
And that's how these things get started, and just got to find the partners and the people that want to partner up and do it.
Yep. No, as I say, so it was nice. It was nice to go to a meeting, meet some good people trying to do some good things. And so,
so is she trying to kind of organize now that we're kind of doing a full circle, organize people at a local level to try and get this whole effort going, right?
Yep. And for a short period of time, one of the city council members was there, and he talked to us for a little bit. Newly elected guy. He was great too. Again, I'm not going to throw out any names, but
right out of Temecula.
Riverside.
County.
Yeah. So, yeah, he was terrific. His family was there. They were terrific.
Nice.
He's it's funny. He's open to her ideas, but he's not exactly sure how to accomplish it or who to convince or what to do. And so that's sort of where the idea of the city possibly donating land started to come up more, because it was more of a concrete and sort of practical idea, because it's like, that's something you could, make an appeal about. It's like, well, we're going to ask for this land to be donated to,
right,
some group to be used for something. It's actually an issue that you can sort of like wrap your head around.
Exactly.
And then you start making a movement towards doing that, and then with the idea that that land will then be used for attainable housing. So that's kind of where it is.
Well, and again, that's where it really takes a relatively small number of people to get behind an idea, to give the local politicians the confidence to kind of make those steps, right? So I hear this all because I talked to a lot of them around here. And literally, if you've got 20, 30 people that are just kind of on whatever the issue is, that's about all it takes. I mean, it really doesn't take that much, because most people are tuned off, and that can be a good or a bad thing. 20 or 30 people, right? They could also do some really bad things too, but generally speaking, most people are constructive and positive.
Yeah.
And it really takes a small amount of people. And so, to your point, just having those few little tangible ideas and a few people behind it, that's what it takes. That's actually starting to happen here in Vista a little bit. The Avo Theater in downtown Vista, which was an old movie theater, city owned. They're just starting to rally troops right now. They're actually have a meeting coming up on the 27th of February to talk about what's the future of it. And now that's a public space, but and so I guarantee you, if 30 or 40 people come up and say, yeah, we want that to be the next Belly Up Tavern, that's probably what it'll turn into. Right. Yeah. And so the same holds true with the land, with the attainable housing thing. I mean, find a place where there looks like it'd be a good place to start, get 20 or 30 people, and be surprised at what could happen.
Yeah, no, as I say, it was an uplifting meeting. Interesting, as I say, on a lot of different levels, on a policy level, but also, as I say, as someone who's really just a third party guy, talking about, how how you move something along like this. And as I say, part of moving something along is getting an organization that will stand behind it. So as I say, it was interesting on a lot of levels.
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad you brought that up. That was a great topic to discuss, because we need those little, little points where we can say, hey, this is a great place for a third party to start plugging in, because it'll resonate. It'll resonate.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of people. Awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's call it there, and then we'll come up with something else next week. I'm sure there's so much going on right now. And I don't want to focus on the big politics or not, but I do have to laugh. I just have to bring up one thing about the whole Nevada thing that's going on right now. Having a primary election and a caucus at the same time in Nevada. Have you heard about that?
Yeah, it's very odd.
And the primary doesn't even really count, because that's not what the Republicans are. They're only counting the caucus, and you can only be in one or the other. And Nikki Haley was in the primary and Trump's in the caucus. And it's like, okay, things have totally gone bonkers.
Yeah. But I mean, I have to say that kind of disorganization and dysfunction is truly emblematic of what the Republican Party is. So, I mean, I'm not that.
Yeah, so I hope there's a bunch of people in Nevada that are independent minded, that take that as fuel to just keep on keeping on, and not to throw shade on Republicans, because the Democrats have their weirdness too. But it's just a perfect example of how third party could really come in and start ending some of this craziness, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, again, if you give people a place to land, let's put it that way. Exactly. If you can really create something that has a message and is willing to stand up on its own, and fight for what it believes in, then people will become attracted to that, because the other two parties are not offering anything that anybody wants.
It's sad. It's very sad. All right. Well, we'll till next week. Stay dry and and hopefully we last through this next storm coming up, and all will be good.
Sounds good.
All right. Talk to you.
See you next week.
Bye.